Hi, I'm Freya, apparently not rich enough to marry into the Walton cult. Hiya, I'm Freya, 32, interior designer, lover of sharp lines and sharper wit. I live in Manchester, the rain-soaked, old flat white-fueled heart of the North, and I run a rather successful little design studio that specializes in homes where people say things like, "We simply had to import the marble from Tuscany and mean it." You know the type. The clients who ask for tasteful opulence and end up with a kitchen, island larger than most London flats. I make good money. I pay taxes. I remember birthdays. I even water my plants. I'm what you'd call emotionally functional adjacent. Until recently, I was also engaged. Yes, I was one of those hopeful, deluded souls who believed in love and shared Netflix passwords. His name was Oliver, because of course it was. You can't be a second son of a Surrey property empire and not be called Oliver. It's basically in the bylaws. We met at a charity art auction where he complimented my knowledge of brutalism and I pretended I hadn't Googled brutalism 15 minutes before arriving. The man was charming in a posh, harmless, vaguely Labrador way, public school accent, perfectly tousled hair, and all the red flags of generational wealth wrapped in a cashmere jumper. I should have known. Anyway, things were going swimmingly. He was sweet, funny. He once cooked me a risotto that didn't taste like punishment. And yes, okay, he sometimes said things like the help without flinching. But I thought, well, he's not his parents. This, by the way, is foreshadowing. It's also what stupid people say before walking straight into a blender. Now, here's where it all starts circling the emotional drain. The parent introduction. A seemingly innocent rite of passage, where you go from being the girlfriend to let's see if she's good enough for our gene pool. Classic. I should have known things would go sideways when Oliver said, "Just be yourself. But maybe don't mention your flat in Salford." Yes, God forbid the family learns that. I live somewhere where people own air fryers and emotions. But I smiled like an idiot because I thought, how bad could it be? Bless me. They live in Surrey, naturally, in a house that could eat my entire postcode for breakfast. You know those properties with winding gravel, driveways and suspiciously large fox statues at the gates. One of those. I turned up in my nicest blouse, silk, secondhand. Cost more than my therapist's hourly rate, trying very hard not to sweat through it. My makeup was flawless, my heels were optimistic, and my soul was already halfway to hell. The door opened and there she was, Catherine, his mother, a woman with the energy of a power cut and the fashion sense of someone who once slapped a stylist. Her pearls could fund a minor military operation. Her expression said, "Don't touch anything." Her handshake said, "I've never washed a dish in my life." And me, I smiled, genuinely, politely, helpfully, like someone who still believed in basic human decency. Reader, she blinked at me like I was a tax audit. I wish I could tell you that things warmed up from there, that we found common ground over the cheese board or bonded over mutual disdain for open-plan kitchens. But no. What followed was one of the most exquisitely awkward dinners of my life, and I once had to eat beetroot soup with a spoon that smelled like fish in Latvia. This topped it. Still, I smiled, I nodded. I let her insult my upbringing with the kind of grace that only comes from suppressing generational trauma and several glasses of Prosecco. And then she reached for the wine, and not for pouring. But I'll save that for the next chapter. Just know this, if you're ever invited to dine with the Waltons and think, it can't be that bad, bring a poncho. The invitation that felt more like a summons. There's something about receiving a formal dinner invitation from your partner's family that should feel exciting, warm, welcoming, even. But when Oliver handed me a thick, cream-colored envelope embossed with a wax seal, yes, a wax bloody seal like we're staging a Jane Austen cosplay, my first thought wasn't, how lovely. It was, who the hell still owns sealing wax in 2025? followed by, I'm going to die in a house with too many staircases. Inside was a card that reeked of both old money and passive aggression. Dinner at 7, it read, Walton Estate, Surrey. No looking forward to meeting you. No smiley face. No Freya, darling. It'll be lovely to have you. Just an address and a time. Like I was being called to court for a public stoning. So naturally, I did what any emotionally fragile woman with a credit card and access to Net-a-Porter would do. I panic shopped. Spent £400 on a silk blouse that whispered, I belong here, while screaming I have no savings. Because God forbid I show up in polyester and risk being mistaken for the help. Oliver, of course, thought I was being dramatic. It's just dinner, babe. My mom's intense, not insane. This, I now know, is the sort of sentence men say when their mother once chased an au pair out of the garden with a croquet mallet. But back then, I was still under the illusion that rich people were eccentric, not actively unhinged. We drove down to Surrey in his sleek little BMW. You know, the one with seats so stiff they make your hips feel like you've been power walking through sand. The further south we went, the more anxious I got. My stomach was tying itself into such intricate knots I could have crocheted a tea cozy out of it. And then we arrived. Picture Downton Abbey, but with slightly less warmth and slightly more hedge sculptures, shaped like predators. Massive wrought iron gates. Gravel so aggressively manicured I swear it crunched judgmentally underfoot. And the house itself. Not a house, a manor. The sort of place that has a music room no one actually plays music in. A house with wings. Wings, plural. The kind of building that doesn't echo, it condescends. As soon as I stepped out of the car, I felt it. That cold, creeping dread you get right before a dentist appointment or when someone says, we need to talk. I adjusted my silk blouse, may as well get my money's worth, and followed Oliver to the front door, already regretting every life choice that had led me to this exact gravel driveway. The door opened before we even rang the bell. That's right, someone anticipated our presence, like a trap had been sprung. And there she was, Catherine, the matriarch, looking every bit like a woman who's never had to return anything in her life. Her outfit, monochrome, pearls, a brooch shaped like a lion eating a sapphire, or something equally terrifying. Her smile was tight enough to chip granite. Ah, she said, not so much with warmth as with the sort of icy politeness that suggests she'd only just learned to tolerate the concept of air. You must be Freya. Not nice to meet you. Not welcome. Just, you must be Freya. Like she was solving a murder clue. And I was the bloodstain on the rug. I said hello in my best middle-class voice. You know, the one that sounds like it went to grammar school and occasionally dabbled in Waitrose. She looked me up and down like she was inspecting a ham with a questionable expiry date. And in that moment, standing on imported marble, surrounded by family portraits older than Britain's GDP, it hit me. This was not a meet and greet. This was a social guillotine. The whole thing reeked of trial by caviar. I could practically hear the soft hum of upper class disdain vibrating through the mahogany. The energy in that house said, we know where your grandfather worked and we're judging you for it. I glanced at Oliver, silently begging for reassurance. He smiled, a soft, harmless smile, completely unaware that I was seconds away from being emotionally waterboarded by a woman whose perfume probably costs more than my rent. And I just knew this wouldn't end in polite awkwardness and a glass of lukewarm white wine. No, this was going to end in emotional bloodshed and a dry cleaning bill. But that's a tale for the next bit, when the wine stopped being metaphorical. Red wine, face, splash, a full-bodied assault. There are moments in life when time slows down. Graduation, weddings, your first flat white after a breakup. And then there's the moment your future mother-in-law lobs a glass of full-bodied Merlot into your face like she's auditioning for Real Housewives of Surrey. We were precisely 10 minutes into the evening. I know this because I'd spent all 10 of them trying to identify what Catherine's signature scent was. Turns out it's a passive aggression layered with subtle notes of dried privilege and threats that don't sound like threats. Dinner hadn't even been served yet. I hadn't insulted the drapes or commented on the 3 taxidermy foxes in the drawing room. I was on my best behavior, sitting on a chair that probably cost more than my entire university education, nodding along to whatever tedious anecdote Catherine was dryly narrating about their house manager needing to be replaced because he couldn't fold linen with flair. And then, without warning, without even a dramatic pause or faint violin swell in the background, splash, a face full of red, lukewarm 2016 Bordeaux, if I had to guess, velvety, smooth, and now dripping down my nose and blouse like a scene from a gothic horror film, where the ghost is middle-class resentment. I blinked a few times, mostly to clear the wine from my eyelashes, but also to double-check I hadn't hallucinated the entire thing. But no, that really was Catherine standing there, arm extended like a psychotic toastmaster, crystal glass still tilted, not a single drop of remorse on her powdered face. And she said, and I quote, "That's to disinfect a poor girl." Disinfect? Like I was some sort of emotional bacteria. She was trying to bleach off her cashmere tablecloth. Let me tell you, nothing says welcome to the family quite like being turned into a human. Sangria before the starters even been plated. Now, if you're wondering what my darling fiance, sweet, oblivious Oliver, did during this scene, straight out of EastEnders, Aristocracy Edition, let me paint the picture. He laughed, not nervously, not awkwardly. No, this boy in an expensive man's clothing, full-on chuckled. Like Mummy just told a cheeky joke about the gardener mislabeling the begonias. And I just sat there, drenched, sticky, smelling like vineyard regret and generational trauma. Because what the hell do you even do when someone metaphorically and literally throws wine in your face? Cry, scream, launch into a soliloquy about classism and emotional terrorism. No, you do what every woman who's been socially assassinated with grace and a side of Cabernet does. You smile. And I did. I smiled. Big and bright. So bright it probably scared the butler. And internally I was planning violence. Not physical. I'm not Catherine, but the kind that requires spreadsheets, legal clauses, and a well-timed email with the subject line, termination of contract, immediate. Because here's what Catherine didn't know, or had conveniently forgotten in her gin-fueled delusion of superiority. Her darling family business, the one that sells overpriced, under-designed bespoke estates. Yeah, they were one of my top commercial clients. I had redesigned 3 of their show homes, personally selected every knob, sconce, and tile that she now walks past with her nose in the air. So she may have drenched me in Merlot, but I was about to drain her profits. But that's next episode material. Right now, I was just sitting there, soggy, insulted, and low-key impressed by how far her arm reached across the table. Truly, Catherine, if nothing else, your upper body strength is admirable. The 160,000 pounds proposal, and not the romantic kind. So there I was, hair matted with Merlot, cheeks glistening in the soft light of inherited chandeliers, and soul gently detaching from my body when Catherine, mother of all madness, decided it was time to up the stakes. She turned to me crisp, calculated, completely unfazed by the fact she'd just assaulted me with a vintage, and with all the warmth of a tax audit, dropped this charming little pearl. You want to marry my son? Pay 160,000 pounds, consider it an entry fee. Now, pause with me, because there are many things I thought might happen at this dinner. Awkward small talk. Definitely. Subtle digs about my background. Absolutely. A mild attempt at bonding over overpriced cheese? One could dream. But a dowry demand? from a woman in Surrey wearing head-to-toe Burberry, who still says coloreds, like it's 1956, not on my bloody bingo card. I stared at her, blinking slowly, still wine-drenched and trying to decide whether I'd slipped into some upper-class fever dream or if this woman had genuinely just tried to invoice me for her son. Let's be clear, this wasn't said in jest. She wasn't joking. There was no wink. No only kidding. Just pure, clinical entitlement. Like I was a debtor at a private school parents' meeting and she was the headmistress holding a gold-plated whip. You'll understand, she said, dabbing delicately at her lipstick mouth with a napkin that probably costs more than my monthly rent. We can't have just anyone marrying into the family. It would dilute the bloodline. Dilute the bloodline. What is this Game of Thrones meets Antiques Roadshow? And I'm sorry, 160,000 pounds. That's not a dowry. That's a ransom. A polite kidnapping with crudites. A six-figure shakedown dressed up in pearls and passive aggression. I glanced over at Oliver, expecting, hoping, praying for some kind of mom. No, what the hell moment. But no. There he sat, dabbing at a speck of wine on his cuff and looking mildly embarrassed, like someone had just farted in yoga. Catherine, he said weakly, in that voice men use when they're vaguely uncomfortable but ultimately spineless. Maybe now's not the time. Not the time. Not the time. When, pray tell, is the time to demand 160,000 pounds for access to your emotionally constipated man-child of a son after pudding over espresso during the bit where we awkwardly loiter by the Range Rover, pretending the night went well? And what exactly does 160,000 pounds get me, Catherine? A key to the West Wing and biannual access to your gin cabinet? Or maybe the privilege of having my children raised by nannies who call me the loud one. She smiled a slow, satisfied, fox in the henhouse smile and sipped her wine. Like this was all perfectly reasonable. Like I should be flattered she was even offering me the option to buy in. And for a moment, a tiny, unhinged moment, I laughed out loud. Because what else do you do, really, when a woman in a Chanel suit tries to charge you six figures to continue dating your own fiancé? You laugh. You laugh because if you don't, you'll scream. And no one likes a screamer at dinner unless it's about a souffle collapsing. I wiped the remaining red off my cheek with my 400 pounds silk sleeve, ripped to both my dignity and dry cleaning allowance, and thought to myself, right, game on. Because if Catherine wanted war, she was about to get one. Spoiler alert, I didn't just leave. I pulled the financial rug out from under her perfectly polished empire. But first, dessert. My fiancé laughed, and something in me quietly died. Of all the horrors that unfurled that night, and believe me, it was a buffet of upper-class absurdity. The moment that truly ended me wasn't the wine in the face, or the casual suggestion that I pay 160,000 pounds to become Cinderella's emotionally neglected cousin. It was this, he laughed. Not a chuckle. Not a tense little wheeze of discomfort. No, he laughed, proper shoulders jiggling, teeth out. Posh boy ha 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 like mummy had just told a slightly racist joke about the help. And I just stared at him. I think I actually tilted my head a bit, like a confused Labrador. Because there he was, the man I was allegedly going to marry, laughing, while his mother attempted to auction off his future like he was a slightly defective Fabergé egg. And I realized, in that exact moment, holding a wine-soaked napkin and blinking through what might have been a single tear or maybe just a rogue Cabernet drip, that I had made a terrible, spectacular, wildly expensive mistake. I'd spent a year thinking I was engaged to a kind, thoughtful, emotionally available man who remembered my coffee order and called my dog sir. Turns out, I was engaged to a spineless, mommy-warped man-child whose idea of loyalty was not correcting his mom when she basically asked me to Venmo her for the privilege of tolerating her. sun's seasonal aloofness and mild halitosis. And look, I'm not asking for some grand romantic gesture. I wasn't expecting him to leap across the table and declare his undying love like we were in some bootleg Richard Curtis film. But maybe, just maybe, a light frown. A that's not appropriate. Or even the bare minimum, not openly laughing when the woman you love gets socially eviscerated in front of a cheese board. But no, apparently, this was all rather hilarious. Apparently, my public humiliation was content for the Walton family's personal Netflix series, Upper Class Torture, Season 3, featuring Freya the Commoner. And as he laughed, though, he really committed to it, I felt something inside me shrivel up. Not explode, not scream, just quietly disintegrate, like a Marks and Spencer biscuit left in tea too long. I sat there, surrounded by antique furniture and generational wealth and the faint smell of emotional rot. And I thought, oh God, I'm the only one here who thinks this is mental. Because no one else batted a bloody eyelid. Not Daddy Walton, who was too busy inspecting his cufflinks. Not the siblings, who were clearly hoping Catherine would turn on me long enough to distract from their own failed hedge fund startups. Just me. Me and the wine. Me and the stained silk blouse. Me and the dying dream of a life with a man who couldn't even stand up for me at dinner. Honestly, I've had more support from a Tesco value bra. And here's the thing no one tells you about heartbreak. Sometimes it doesn't come with fireworks or dramatic speeches or shouting in the rain. Sometimes it arrives while you're pretending to enjoy Stilton, trying not to cry in a chair upholstered with colonialism. I looked at him, at Oliver, and I didn't feel rage or sadness or even betrayal. I felt bored. Bored of making excuses. Bored of playing nice. Bored of being the only one clapping for a relationship that had clearly ended 20 minutes before the starters arrived. So I smiled. Of course I smiled. In this family, emotions are for staff and migraines. I smiled and said, "Excuse me," and left the table like a woman who still had a shred of pride wedged somewhere under her ruined eyeliner. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just planned. Because, well, Catherine had her wine and her money and her pathetic little power trip. I had something far more dangerous. Leverage. And next, I used it. Time to smile, plot, and torch a bridge. So I smiled. Not the soft, dew-eyed rom-com kind that ends in a wedding and a labradoodle. No. This was a very specific smile. The kind of smile you wear when someone tells you to calm down, and you're already picturing what their living room would look like in flames. It was the smile of a woman wronged publicly, fragrantly, and holding in the screen with a teaspoon of barely reheated dignity and a strong desire to slap someone with a charcuterie board, and then like a beacon from the heavens, or more accurately, a smug little light bulb flickering above a very tired woman's head. I remembered something. Their family business. Walton and Archer Luxury Property Group. You've probably seen them plastered across the posh bits of London, like a designer rash. Bespoke estates for discerning clients. It's all very champagne-scented, and full of words like curated and exclusivity. And this room is only for standing. And guess who happens to be one of their biggest clients? Go on, guess. Me. Hi, Freya. That poor girl you tried to disinfect with wine. I own 2 buildings they manage. Entire developments. I design the interiors myself. They're an architectural digest and everything. They've been happily collecting my money. Like it's some sort of passive-aggressive tax on good taste. I've sat in boardrooms with their senior partners, made architectural suggestions that improved their project values, literally increased their profit margins, and never once did Catherine the Snobbies realize who I actually was. Because to her, I was just the girlfriend, the decorative peasant, a pretty woman moment gone rogue, something to be wiped off her wine glasses and forgotten. And now, my darling Catherine, I am the woman who pays your bills. I took a long, slow sip of flat Prosecco. It tasted like smug. Oliver was still giggling into his collar like an extra from Downton Abbey who never got a real storyline. His mother was twirling her pearls like a Bond villain. And I was already mentally drafting the termination notice for every single contract I had with Walton and Archer. And here's the fun part. I didn't even have to lie. All I had to do was smile, that smile. The burn dash it dash down dash with dash a curtsy smile. And say, well, this has been illuminating. They heard pleasant. I meant prepare yourselves. I excused myself before dessert. Not dramatically, mind. I didn't need to flounce. I left calmly, politely, like a woman who knows exactly where the metaphorical bodies are buried and just needs a minute to grab a spade. Oliver followed me to the car, still sheepish and confused. Babe, don't take it so personally, he said, as if his mom hadn't just demanded. I pay a dowry like we're in some Jane Austen prequel directed by Satan. I just nodded, kissed him on the cheek, and said, I won't. I never take business personally. Which was true. But revenge, that's deeply, deliciously personal. By the time I got home, I'd already emailed my lawyer, my accountant, and my assistant. Effective immediately, cut all ties with Walton and Archer. No more contracts. No more renewals. No more exclusivity. Let them renovate their own bloody kitchens. I even left a little postscript for their office. This decision is due to an irreconcilable breakdown in professionalism. Also, your CEO threw wine at me. Polite, factual, brutal, like an HR letter in a revenge dress. And reader, it felt good. It felt correct. It felt like pouring a 2012 Bordeaux onto a velvet sofa and walking away in slow motion. Did I just nuke my relationship? Possibly. But more importantly, I nuked their bottom line. And next came the fun part. Dear Catherine, kindly set off an email with bite. The next morning, I woke up not to sunlight, nor birdsong, nor even the comforting beep of my Nespresso machine. No, I woke up to rage. The classy, grown-up kind. The kind that wears silk pajamas and schedules meetings just to end them early. The kind that opens a fresh email draft before brushing its teeth. Because after all the wine, the 160,000 pounds marriage toll, and my wet sock fiancé giggling like a schoolboy who just discovered breasts, there was one final indignity still to be addressed. Business. And darling, I don't mix business with pleasure unless I need to make someone cry over both. So I poured myself a cup of something overpriced, opened my laptop, and crafted the digital equivalent of slapping someone across the face with a vintage clutch. Yes, it was an email, but it had strong letter from the Bank of England energy. It was laced with just enough corporate civility to avoid legal repercussions, and just enough venom to wither an orchid at 30 paces. Subject line: termination of contractual engagements, effective immediately. Body: Dear Catherine, I trust this message finds you well, although if not, I can't say I'm particularly devastated. Following our recent interaction at your Surrey estate, and the unforgettable moment in which you hurled red wine at my face like we were extras in Real Housewives of Knightsbridge, I've come to the rather inevitable conclusion that our professional relationship, much like your moral compass, is unsalvageable. Effective immediately, I will be terminating all contracts between my firm and Walton and Archer. This includes our ongoing work at Hanover Muse, the Knightsbridge Penthouse Project, and the Not At All Settle Mayfair bachelor pad that reeks of divorce and emotional neglect. Please consider this email formal notice of withdrawal, not only from our business dealings, but from any and all association with a company that conducts itself with the grace and charm of a fox in a Waitrose. Furthermore, I will be informing my professional network, which, unlike your wine choices, is both robust and tasteful, that any future dealings with Walton and Archer come with a strong health warning. Namely, it's like licking an electrical socket, electrifying, unpleasant, and liable to leave you twitching on the floor in regret. Sincerely, Freya Harrington, Director, Harrington Interiors. Also the poor girl you tried to publicly marinate in Pinot Noir. I hit send. And reader, I smiled. Not the angry, twitchy smile from last night. No, this was a clean smile. The kind of smile that comes after a deep exfoliation of one's emotional baggage. It was composed, radiant, slightly terrifying. I imagined Catherine reading it over her breakfast grapefruit, slowly realizing that the woman she dismissed as decorative was, in fact, the financial backbone of several of her most profitable developments. Oops. I also imagined Oliver, still hungover from entitlement and red wine, asking what was wrong while she screamed into a Hermes cushion. And before you ask, no, I didn't give them a grace period. No 30-day buffer. No transition clause. Just one cold, clean surgical slice through the contracts. If Catherine wanted to play medieval games with marriage and dowries, then I could be equally futile. Off with their revenue stream. Within hours, I had my lawyer confirming the terminations, my assistant forwarding the memo to every project lead, and one delightfully panicked call from one of Walton's junior partners, asking if this was a mistake. I told him, sweetly, yes, the mistake was ever signing with you lot in the first place. Click. It was petty. It was brutal. It was petty and brutal. And it felt bloody marvelous. Somewhere between the spreadsheets and the spite. I remembered who I was, Freya effing Harrington. I don't beg for approval. I bill for it. So, Catherine, if you're reading this, consider this my RSVP to your family's nonsense. No, thank you. And do sod off. From wine-stain to savage queen, my glorious petty era. Some women spiral after heartbreak. Me, I schedule meetings. With vengeance. Look, I'd already lost my patience, my silk blouse, and the last shred of faith I had in upper-class men named Oliver. The least I could do was salvage my dignity and torch a few bridges while I was at it. Not just for me, for every woman who's ever smiled through a red wine facial at a Surrey dinner party. So I did what any rational, emotionally stable businesswoman would do after being told she needed to pay £160,000 to marry into the Walton House of Delusion. I entered my petty era, capital P capital E bedazzled, in metaphorical rhinestones and a designer trench coat. Step 1. Start small, tasteful, elegant. I pulled all my designs from Walton and Archer's flagship showroom, the one on Regent Street with the terrifying sculpture in the window that looks like a haunted Fabergé egg. No more handcrafted statement chairs. No more bespoke mood lighting. Just an empty floor and the echo of Catherine's ego shriveling. Then I canceled their Mayfair penthouse project. Oh yes, that one. The one with the kitchen island that looked like it was stolen from a Travelodge breakfast buffet. I warned them, didn't I? Textured granite is over, darling. But no, they wanted bold. What they got was visually offensive. So I sent an email politely explaining I wouldn't be completing a design that looked like it was conceived during a midlife crisis and Pinterest blackout. After that, well, the crown jewel, redirection. Not subtle, mind you. I went full Genghis Khan with better posture. I started gently suggesting to my clients, the sort with net worths that come with a silent zero, that perhaps Walton and Archer were no longer, what's the phrase, in alignment with luxury branding expectations, which is posh speak for their vibe is rancid. One of them actually said, "Ah, yes, I heard their work's been quite tacky lately." I nodded solemnly, like a disappointed headmistress. It's a shame. They used to be tasteful. Then they added a gold bidet in Belgravia. He immediately booked with a competitor. Do you know how satisfying it is to watch Catherine's precious empire crack? One exquisitely timed whisper at a time. Like watching a souffle collapse because someone breathed on it too hard. And reader, I wasn't breathing. I was blowing it down like the big bad wolf in a Chanel blazer. Meanwhile, my Trustpilot rating stayed pristine. 5 shining stars and glowing testimonials like, Freya transformed our space into a masterpiece. Professional, visionary, and refreshingly no-nonsense. Translation, she didn't insult my net worth or hurl Merlot at my forehead. Even better, the competitors I redirected business to loved me. I was like the fairy godmother of luxury design leads. One firm sent me flowers. Another sent biscuits. One rather enthusiastic one offered to name a chaise longue after me. Call it the Harrington, I said. Make it bold, like a power move disguised as a sofa. Was it petty? Yes. Was it brilliant? Also yes. Was it deeply therapeutic? Oh my God, you have no idea. I could practically feel my skin clearing and my tax bracket rising every time someone said, Catherine who? Look, I never wanted to go full savage. I was happy to be the poised, graceful woman in the expensive heels, who hosted tasteful wine evenings and made small talk about curtain pleats. But when you douse that woman in a 28-pound glass of Shiraz and demand a 6-figure dowry, she gets ideas. Vicious, glorious, high-end ideas. So here I am, from wine-stained humiliation to 5-star domination. And Catherine, she still has her pearls, but I have clients' contracts and the last laugh, which, frankly, pairs beautifully with revenge and a dry Malbec. The breakup text that felt like a refund. Yes, the fiance. Almost forgot about him. Spoiler, I didn't. While I was orchestrating a business-level takedown that would make the Borgias clap, Oliver, bless his over-moisturized little soul, was radio silent. Not an apology. Not a check-in. Not even a sorry mom threw a 2016 real high in your eyes, babe. Just silence. Which is ironic, really, considering he always had so much to say about where to put scatter cushions. But when his mom went full Miss Havisham with a vengeance kink, he suddenly had the communication skills of a potted plant. So I did what any woman with a bruised ego, a full-body grudge, and Wi-Fi would do. I sent a voice note. And when I say voice note, I mean a 3-minute, one-woman theatrical production that deserved an Olivia Award, a dramatic reading, a cleansing, a rage purge delivered in crisp, passive-aggressive Queen's English. I began sweetly. Hi, love. Just wanted to say I really admire how close you are with your mom. Not everyone's brave enough to still live emotionally inside the womb at 32. Then, casually, hope mommy's money keeps you warm at night. Maybe she can knit you a spine next time she's in Knightsbridge. And do tell her to Venmo you a personality. Maybe try the express option. And finally, with the devastating calm of someone who's already deleted your contact. Best of luck with the prenup she's drafting in blood and port. I'm off to buy myself flowers with a refund of dignity I got from blocking you. Cheers. And I did. Block him, that is. Everywhere. Phone, Instagram, Spotify. I wasn't about to accidentally hear our song and spiral over a man who once said, "What's wrong with a Union Jack backsplash?" Reader, it felt cleansing, like a refund on my emotional investment, like Amazon Prime for heartbreak, return processed, funds back, would not recommend. What came next was the part no one warns you about. The stillness. The oh god, now what phase. No dramatic rebounds. No 1,000 to 100 pounds I'm over it haircut. Just me, sitting in my very tastefully decorated flat, sipping a chamomile tea and realizing I'd spent an entire year trying to impress a family that thought flaw. Grass was a personality trait. So I went to therapy. Real, actual therapy, not just drunken chats with my mate Ella over Rose. Although those continued. Obviously. Turns out, having a trained professional tell you that your ex-fiance laughing while his mother baptizes You in Bordeaux might be a red flag. Hugely validating. Slowly, I rebuilt myself, my peace, my skincare routine. I discovered that I was actually quite brilliant and funny and entirely deserving of a relationship where the bare minimum didn't check wine at me in front of a Venetian cheese platter. And eventually, when I least expected it, obviously, I met someone. Someone who doesn't flinch when I say things like trauma or mother-in-law tried to invoice me for love. Someone who thinks assaulting your partner with red wine is, bad. Revolutionary. I know. He listens. He asks questions. He opens the car door for me and has opinions about grout colors. He's a bit posh, but in this sexy way. Not that Catherine has a direct line to Jacob Rees-Mogg. And when I told him this whole story, he didn't laugh. He just said, "Sounds like she ruined a perfectly good vintage tragic." Reader, I nearly married him on the spot. Freya, 1 wine witch, 0. So yeah, that's how I went from soon-to-be Walton to professional business scorcher. From fiancé to CEO of Petty and Glorious Limited. From will she fit into our lifestyle? Tulips, she just bankrupted our Surrey extension project. Character development, darling, look it up. People say revenge is a dish best served cold. I say it's best served via email, with a blind CC to half of Belgravia's investor circle. And honestly, best decision I ever made. Right up there with laser hair removal and never texting him back after the voice note. I used to think love was about compromise. Blending lives, adjusting expectations, choosing throw pillows together. Turns out, love should not involve dodging vintage Merlot like you're in a budget action film. And if you told me a year ago, I'd cancel contracts worth 6 figures because a woman in a pearl choker thought I wasn't worthy of her flaccid, codependent son, I'd have laughed, nervously, over a glass of wine. I didn't see coming, but I did it. I torched the bridge, salted the earth, and redecorated the battlefield, tastefully. And somewhere along the way, I found something better than the title of Mrs. Walton. Self-respect with a side of vengeance. Do I miss him? No. I miss the dog. They had this sweet golden retriever who used to sit next to me during those insufferable dinners like, "You okay, hun?" But him, not once. Not a flicker. I wouldn't trust that man to boil a kettle, let alone build a life with me. The truth is, the minute I stepped back and saw it for what it was, a performance, a posh pantomime starring Mummy Dearest and her human mannequin of a son, the spell broke. I wasn't Cinderella. I was the event planner forced to watch her own glass slipper auctioned off for family approval and 3 shares in Waitrose. So here's the takeaway, and not the Deliveroo kind. If you're out there, dating someone whose family makes your stomach twist like a bad prawn cocktail, trust your gut. Not the curated Instagram version. The real, gritty, why does his mother speak in passive-aggressive limericks version? Because no matter how shiny the ring, or how expensive the starter at their country club, it's not worth selling your dignity for the Walton surname. And if you do find yourself at a dinner where someone weaponizes a glass of claret and calls it disinfectant, don't cry. Don't flinch. Smile like the emotionally stable maniac you are. And make a mental note to cancel £3 million worth of business the next morning. Freya, 1. Wine witch. Oh, I may not have walked away with a husband, but I did leave with my pride, a killer business portfolio, and a new appreciation for just how satisfying it is to say, "I'll have the wine, but this time in a glass, not the face."